I decided to go with a batch macro for this challenge. I know that there's definitely simpler ways that you could have done it. I've had a look at some of the other solutions from the community after I did it, and you know when you spend so long trying to work something out, and you know there's a simpler way, but you just kind of want to power through with your own logic, and that's what I did today. I thought, haven't built a batch macro for a little while, why not give it a go? So the way that I chose to do this, so here's our input data. I'm grouping my IDs so that that will be my control parameter. So each iteration of the macro will run for each of these different IDs. And I also put a record ID so that I could keep a hold of what order my data was in. Okay, so into the macro itself, we come in. We first of all want to identify with our IDs. So I started with ID 3. I'll explain a little bit why I did that in a minute. So this is just for the purposes of working with the data. So it's going to keep in only IDs which are 3. Everything else is going to be null. And then, we want to basically sum together all of these values between those IDs which are 3. So how do we go about doing that? So first of all, filtered out any of those IDs which are null so that we can just order those two. So which one's the first one, which one's the second one. And so that's how we're doing that. So we can join it back together and just have this order field here so that then if we're doing a fill down in a multi-row formula, then what we want to be able to do is we want to take the ID from the previous row, but then we want to be able to stop it somehow if it's the second 3. So that's why I put on this order field so that we can check if this row above has a 2 in it, then we don't want to continue filling it down. We only want to fill it down if it's starting from this one going to this one. And again, there's much simpler ways to do this, but this is the way that I thought of and pursued. Rather than doing this whole picking out and ordering, I could have just, used a summarize tool to find the min and max for the record ID, for example. That would also have helped to point it out. But anyway, this is how I chose to do it. I put on a sort tool just in case it came out of the join tool in a different order. And then in my multi-row formula tool, I'm just saying if the ID is equal to 3, and this is the point where I'm going to mention, once I've gone through the whole formula, why I chose ID 3, then keep it as the ID. Else, if that row above is a 3 and the order isn't equal to 2, so we don't want it to fill in if it's a null here, then we take the previous ID, otherwise null. So there we go, that's how we fill in those in-between values there. And so the reason that I chose a 3 is because this control parameter linked to this action, we're just replacing that 3 for each time it runs. It wants to update with a different ID number. And if I chose a 1 here, then I was worried that, for example, it would change this 1 here as well, the row -1 in our multi-row formula. I didn't actually check, but I was just a little bit worried. And similarly, I didn't want to choose a 2 here because we're using a 2 in this part of the formula too. So I just thought 3, make it nice and safe, make it nice and easy. It doesn't really matter what we're referencing. It's still gonna, that control parameter is still gonna change, and we just want to make sure it's only changing the parts that we want it to. Okay, so then we can, once we've filled that all out, we want to filter out anything that isn't in between those 2 3s, and then we can just go ahead and use our summarize tool to group by ID and sum those sales. And you'll see that what comes out of our macro is matching to the output here. Okay, hopefully that made sense. I know it's a little bit overcomplicated, but hopefully the logic makes sense to you, and do investigate the other simpler solutions too on the community. Thanks very much for watching.